Today, many Americans take for granted the freedoms they enjoy, often forgetting that the road to American independence was a long and arduous one. The struggle for freedom began during the late 1760s when the British government under King George III placed new taxes on the colonies. Angry colonists rebelled. Parliament did lift all taxes but one, the tea tax. One night, a group of colonists refused to allow British tea to be unloaded in what's known as the Boston Tea Party. Disguised as Native Americans, they boarded the ship and dumped more than 340 chests of tea into the water. The British responded with tough actions. Boston's port was closed, and men appointed by King George III replaced many officials from Massachusetts. Troops were sent into the colonies to enforce British rule. Most of the colonies sent delegates to Philadelphia to meet in a group called the Continental Congress. The Congress asked Britain to relax its control over the colonies, but the British refused. Then, on April 19, 1775, a force of British troops tried to seize arms and ammunition colonists had gathered in Concord, Massachusetts. The two sides exchanged fire in the first battles of the Revolutionary War. Underlying this unrest were more than issues of taxes. Colonists felt they were fighting for their rights. They made this claim based on the ideas of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was an intellectual movement that celebrated human reason and science, as well as freedom from tyrannical government and religious persecution. One Enlightenment thinker in particular, an English philosopher named John Locke, had an enormous influence on the thinking of colonists. In the late 1600s, Locke had written that a government is only legitimate if it protects an individual's rights to life, liberty, and private property. He went further, saying that people have the right to overthrow a government that violates these rights. Colonists who wanted independence, the Patriots, believed that this is exactly what had happened in the colonies. The British government, they said, had violated colonists' rights with its unfair taxes and other harsh actions. Still, when the fighting broke out, only about 1/3 of the colonists favored a rebellion. Another third supported the British government. These people, called loyalists, thought the colonists' complaints could be settled peacefully and believed the Americans could never win a war against the powerful British Army. The remaining third were indifferent. Slowly but surely, opinions began to shift. Enlightenment philosophy played a role in helping that shift take place. Enter Thomas Paine, an Englishman who had recently arrived in America. Paine, familiar with Enlightenment thinking, felt Americans' rights were being stifled by the tyrannical British government. In January of 1776, Paine published a 47-page pamphlet in which he argued strongly for American independence. The pamphlet was called Common Sense, and in it, Paine used forceful, everyday language to attack the idea that the British king should rule the American colonies. He also declared that American independence would be a victory for humans everywhere. He wrote,
"The sun never shined on a cause of greater worth. 'Tis not the concern of a day, a year, or an age. Posterity will be affected, even to the end of time."
Within 3 months, 120,000 copies of Common Sense had been printed and were being read aloud throughout the colonies in taverns, schools, pulpits, and street corners. Paine's words helped convince many Americans that the cause of independence was a just one. Then, on June 7, 1776, a delegate from Virginia named Richard Henry Lee addressed the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia. He offered a resolution.
That these united colonies are free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown.
The Congress appointed a committee to draft a Declaration of Independence. the committee assigned Thomas Jefferson, its youngest member, to write the Declaration. Jefferson borrowed ideas from fellow Virginian George Mason. Mason had just written a new constitution for Virginia in which he stated that all men are, by nature, equal, free, and independent, and enjoy their inherent rights to life and liberty. Mason himself had based these words on the Enlightenment ideas of John Locke. After working 2 days and 2 nights, Jefferson completed the first draft of the Declaration of Independence. In the spirit of the Enlightenment, he wrote,
"We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness."
Using the logic of the Enlightenment, Jefferson outlined the reasons why the colonists were justified in separating from Britain. He wrote that King George had violated the colonists' rights and that the American people had the right to change an unjust government. On July 2, 1776, the Continental Congress voted in favor of independence. 2 days later, it approved the final version of Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. George Washington, commander of the Continental Army, had the Declaration read aloud to his troops to inspire them in their fight against the British. The Declaration, however, merely represented the colony's commitment to freedom. The task of winning independence still remained, and that meant winning the war with the British. That task was a difficult one. An important step toward independence came at the Battle of Saratoga in 1777. American troops forced thousands of British soldiers to surrender. Saratoga proved to be the turning point in the war. After Saratoga, France entered into an alliance with America. The French began sending troops and ships to help the Americans. 4 years later, Washington led American and French troops to trap a British army near Yorktown, Virginia. On October 19, 1781, the British surrendered. Yorktown was the last major battle of the American Revolution. Soon after, the Americans and British began working out a peace treaty. In that treaty, the Treaty of Paris, Britain finally recognized American independence. The Patriots' dream had come true. A revolution inspired by Enlightenment ideas resulted in the birth of a new nation, the United States of America.
Was Paine right about the role of the American Revolution in world history? How does the Declaration of Independence reflect Enlightenment thought?